All right, so let's get started with our intros. I'll just go in alphabetical order by last name. So Dr. Parr, would you be able to go first and introduce yourself? Again, just your name, your employer, and your professional title, and then just a brief description of your professional experience as well as your education.
Sure. So my name is Damian Parr, and use he, him, his pronouns. I am the Research and Education Academic Coordinator for the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. It's a center here at UCSC on the campus. We have a 30-acre farm, and we do a lot of education for undergraduate students, grad students, professional practitioners, so ag and hort professional vocational work, and as well as conduct research, field experiments, and also social science research as a center. I'm also an instructor in environmental studies in the agroecology major, which was founded this last fall quarter. And so my background, actually, I started farming while I was in high school. I did this avocado thing just to like give it some levity. It's like 5 o'clock, right? We're all probably burnt a bit on the day and Zoom. So I just a little bit about my background actually. So I was raised in a mixed class background, and during some of my earliest like primary cultural periods was living in LA and working class poor communities of color, and experiencing food insecurity with that poverty myself. And that kind of traumatizing experience influenced my career trajectory. So y'all might, if you haven't, to the extent to which everyone hasn't done a bunch of psychotherapy yet in your lives, you might check in on what motivates you, and you might relate it back to some early life experiences. In any case, yeah, I was food insecure, and it really influenced my outlook about what I wanted to do. And then I was also kind of introduced to a lot of the critical perspectives on race and class, gender, and these forms of domination and inequities early on in my childhood. And I was pretty darn disappointed about what was going on globally. And so I'm old, you know, I'm almost 50. So this was like a long time ago, but we had our version of climate change was like ozone holes. The rainforest was starting to get really hit, AIDS and massive famines and such. And so I was pretty bumming on the whole situation, very disappointed and angry and enraged at my own experience, my community's experience, and just like the global thing. So I basically got into farming as a way to withdraw legitimacy from what I saw was like dominant imperialistic societal norms. And I discovered I was really too poor to actually go into agriculture. And so this is something about career work. Farming in the North, like up here in the US, like you got to be pretty capitalized, and we're doing pretty good at creating some supports increasingly. But federal policy, neoliberal economics and such is really brutal on anyone that's wanting to like has a picture of like owner operator or some, you know, what we'd call like subsistence farming, which is still the global norm, but in places like California, it's really rough. I discovered that, yeah, there was no kind of career path for me in production itself. So I pursued education as a way to like trade out my value and try to figure out a way I can stay in farming and growing food. But not be essentially, you know, consumed by the marketplace, not having a way to protect myself economically and support my family. And so I went to school. So I went to actually here, I did the apprenticeship program at Caspis. I also did environmental studies undergraduate degree. I continued farming, taking breaks, keeping it grounded, doing some international travel and to learn from indigenous communities around the globe. And then decided that really where I wanted to make my kind of contribution and difference was in higher education and adult education. I saw that basically like 18 to 24-year-olds are the ones that are out on the street really pushing for change and transformation, like you've seen in the protests over the summer. And so I wanted to work with this demographic, this population, and I want to work in public higher education institutions. So I pursued graduate work because I saw that there was a whole gatekeeping process about accessing higher education without a master's, at least, if not a PhD. And I pursued, I was also very interested in trying to change the institutions, these public institutions in particular, to be focused on contesting the whole dominant inequity and oppression, neocolonial orientations. And so I chose to go to UC Davis for a master's in international ag development. It was the closest thing that was paying attention to these critical social issues in addition to ecology and the environment. And then I was there and not yet with a family and having that whole workout. So I pursued the PhD program in ag and environmental science education. Again, I'm focused on education. So my work, it might be hard for y'all to kind of like understand. So I'm trained, I have a PhD, I'm trained, and typically people are trained in research institutions like that to just go become faculty researchers and to become faculty. But my orientation has been very much at like, how am I going to help with subverting this dominant political economy and white supremacy and this culture that's going on globally. And so, and as a racialized white person, like, how do I insert myself in these structures where I can take some direct and efficient responsibility for, you know, my family's business, so to speak. And so that's how I find myself in higher education. But I don't pursue like a traditional faculty positions, in part because, well, there's just a lot of ways to intervene with institutional structures. And so that's going to be one of my take homes. So sorry that went on forever. You can take it out of my time later. I can get into like the creativity of how we basically pay bills and protect ourselves, to support our families materially, but also live inside of our idealism or our passion, our desperation to do something about the problems.
All right, no, thank you so much. That was a great introduction. Next, Erin, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a student.
Oh, Erin from our city forest? Is your, sorry, is your connection all right?
It's really struggling. I'm so sorry what's happening right now, but yeah, let me know if you can hear me,
Yes.
and I'll try to fix it if not.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Your video is just lagging a little bit for me, but I can hear you.
Okay, well, we'll we'll try to make do. Thanks for having me on here. And yeah, I'm Erin. I'm the outreach coordinator at Our City Forest. And Our City Forest is an urban forestry nonprofit, kind of located in the heart of San Jose. Actually, one of our attendees here tonight used to serve AmeriCorps with us. So Anna, thanks for coming back. Glad to hear from you. And yeah, I somewhat recently graduated. I attended Santa Clara University and graduated in 2019. And I had studied psychology and environmental science and was just sort of looking for a way to combine the two fields, and had an interest in working with people, but also wanted to do that within the environmental world. And I found Our City Forest at a career fair, actually, at Santa Clara, and was excited about the work that they did in the San Jose community and kind of how broad of a reach they really have. We plant trees throughout Santa Clara County, and our goal is to kind of reforest the Bay Area, and we mainly focus on Santa Clara County. And so, yeah, that sort of really piqued my interest, and I applied as an AmeriCorps member and served and am still serving as an AmeriCorps member. And yeah, that's kind of a little background on how I got to where I am.
Thank you so much. Sarah Sugar, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name's Sarah Sugar. I am an a senior environmental scientist at the State Water Resources Control Board, or the State Water Board for short. And I started in my current position about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 if you take out maternity leave. Right now I'm starting next week, I'll be acting lead for our Sustainable Groundwater Management Act unit. So we'll be helping implement the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SIGMA. We've got a lot of acronyms on the state water board side. Before I got this current position, I was working as an environmental scientist for the state water board, working on water rights permitting, which gets very complex very quickly, it turns out. And before that, I went back to school to the Yale School of the Environment. Now, at the time, it was called the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, which I admit is a little more of a mouthful, and got a master's in environmental management. And before that, I worked for 3 years as an environmental scientist at a smaller state agency, the State Lands Commission, doing environmental impact assessment with the California Environmental Quality Act. I'll try to avoid acronyms where I can. And before that, I was teaching SAT classes because I graduated from Santa Cruz in the middle of a recession.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Tang, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Tang. I am a GIS analyst for Maxar. Even if you don't recognize the name Maxar, you've definitely seen our product because we provide all the satellite maps for Google, Apple Maps, Facebook, basically any mobile app that you would be using. I actually graduated from Santa Cruz with a bachelor's in marine biology. And I kind of got into this route because I did a lot of GIS work with the Costa Lab and the Wilmer's Lab. So if you're interested in GIS, those are 2 labs I would highly suggest you try to get into. In terms of my what I did after I graduated, I knew I wanted to go to grad school. Originally, I thought I wanted to kind of go to the distance and become a professor. So right after I graduated, I actually started working with the ACE program on campus as one of the advisors. While I was doing that, I was kind of prepping my application for grad school, and then I got accepted to multiple programs, largely on the basis of my kind of GIS background and ability to do spatial movement ecology. I went to graduate school at Miami University of Ohio, not the one in Florida. And there I studied in the geography department. And I was actually recruited out of there to go to multiple USGS labs to do spatial ecology work. Probably the most prestigious one is the Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Lab. That's the main migratory bird lab in the country. The problem with a lot of the labs that I was recruited to is that they were in the middle of nowhere. So the migratory bird lab, that one's in the middle of North Dakota. I think the town that it was right next to had 5,000 people, and I was 4 hours away from the airport. A couple of the other labs that really wanted me to come, I mean, we're talking in the middle of Appalachia, and I think there was one that was in the middle of Nevada. And so I'm sure for somebody in the group, you're thinking, oh, that's my dream job. And I'm sure it is for somebody, but for me, I'm a little bit more, I like being close to a city of not necessarily living inside the city. So regretfully, I turned down all those offers. and I just kind of started putting in applications for GIS around the country. And one of the first companies to call me back was Maxar, and they asked me to interview, and went through the interview, and then they brought me on board, kind of an entry-level position. Did a great job, just got promoted. So yeah, I'm a GIS analyst at Maxar.
Thank you, and congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you.
Okay, so sorry. So I know that we have a lot of attendees today, and I'm sure that you all have a lot of really great questions that you want to ask. So I'm going to try to keep the prepared questions section of the event to a minimum, but I just have a few questions that I'd like to ask our panelists, just a few general questions based on the things that our attendees submitted in the Zoom registration form. So first question is, what opportunities did you take advantage of as an undergraduate student that you can remember that led you to your current career or helped you develop the skills that you needed for your current career? And sort of related to that, what advice would you give attendees in this meeting for preparing to enter the job market as an undergraduate student?
I can start with that one.
That would be great.
I think the most important thing I did as an undergrad was I worked with Chris Wolmers. I mean, he's an EMVS professor, runs the Santa Cruz Puma project. And the main reason why I say that is because the GIS that I learned working with him in his lab, he basically told me, I don't know how to advise an undergrad, so I'm just going to treat you like one of my grad students. And so what he was able to teach me kind of took my skills to a level that I'm pretty sure not too many undergrads get to experience at UC Santa Cruz. And to give you an idea, when I arrived at grad school, I met with the GIS coordinator because they're trying to figure out, like, okay, how do we translate your GIS courses to our GIS courses here at Miami? And so they busted out the syllabus and they were like, all right, go through it and tell us what you think you know, and then we'll see if you actually know it. And so I just picked up like their advanced GIS course, looked at the final project, and I said, oh, I can do this in like 3 hours. And they looked at me and they said, oh, that's like a 4-week project. That's kind of ambitious for you to say you can do it in 3 hours. And I looked at her and I said, well, I can. If you don't mind, I can log into your computer right now and I'll knock it out in 3 hours. And so as I started the project, they quickly realized I was able to. And as we discussed it, she asked me, well, how did you get so good? You're just an undergrad. I mean, you just have your bachelor's and you have a year of experience out of it, but it looks like you weren't really working in a geospatial type job. And I said, well, I actually worked with one of the guys who's considered the preeminent spatial ecologist in the world. And so she didn't recognize the name, but when I started like ticking off the things he had done, she was like, oh, I know those techniques, because she also had a background in spatial movement ecology. And so to me, that was like the number one thing. I basically, they phased me out of all their classes and they said, there's none of the coursework, you're too advanced for it. So you're going to have to work one-on-one with one of the GIS professors, which is what I eventually did. And working with that GIS professor, she had connections all over the industry. If you've used Google Earth Engine, she is colleagues with the director of Google Earth Engine. And she was able to actually network to get me into Maxar. She got me the interview and she said, from the interview, you're kind of on your own, but I can get you to the interview. And that's basically what happened. But it all started because I started working with Chris Wolmers in his lab. With that being said, it's kind of hard to work with him directly. You typically do work with one of his grad students. But if you're able to convince him to take you on for your senior thesis, which is the route I took, was I did my senior thesis under him, then you can get a lot more one-on-one instruction. He'll teach you a lot of coding, which I feel is very important if you plan to look into GIS as a possible career path. And he basically took my skills to the next level, above and beyond what I think you would find in the GIS courses that you see at Santa Cruz, even though ironically he is on the faculty board of directors for the GIS courses.
Would you be willing to type his name into the chat?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Sarah, would you like to give some feedback on this question?
Sure. And I wouldn't say that what I did in undergrad directly led to this job. And I think maybe that was because I was a little scattered in my interests in undergrad, and also just pivoted a lot. But I would say I double majored in philosophy and environmental studies, and the philosophy degree really helped make me a precise writer. I mean, that's not why I did the philosophy degree, but it did have that sort of side effect. And my first real job out of college, sort of months after I'd been hired, my boss mentioned, you didn't know, like you had less background in some of the work than other applicants, but the other applicants couldn't write very well, and I'd much rather teach someone the California Environmental Quality Act than teach someone how to write. So I'd say, I mean, I also worked as a writing assistant, I don't know what they're called now, for Stevenson, which helped just work on my own writing. And then I'd say something I could have done in undergrad that I eventually did in grad school was I really sort of focused on the area I wanted to be in. And when I was in grad school, the program was pretty broad, so you could focus within the program sort of in a lot of different directions. And at the time, California was undergoing a pretty substantial drought, and I wanted to be helpful back home. And so I ended up focusing in water and doing fellowships related to water and taking classes related to water. And that helped me get a job in water. I feel like I could speak pretty competently to some of the issues and interviews, and just meant I wasn't starting from scratch.
Thank you. Erin, what about you? Did you have anything that you did as an undergrad that helped you develop those skills?
Yeah, I feel like my career is very nonprofit related. So I find myself wanting to stay in the nonprofit world, and nonprofits rely very heavily on their volunteer base, and I volunteered a lot at different organizations throughout my time when I was an undergrad, and it's a good way to kind of test out like what areas you find interesting. Like I never was for certain that I wanted to enter into trees and like urban forestry. I'd never even really like considered it as something that I found interesting. And I actually volunteered through a class with our city forest. And so that was my initial introduction after hearing about them at a career fair. And then getting to see kind of through the volunteer process, the inside scoop on the organization really kind of developed my interest in working. And so, yeah, I would just say, check out what volunteer options there are for different places or internships, things like that, and just go for it.
Great, thank you. Damien, what about you?
Yeah, for me, where I was coming from, the University of California was a really different experience in working in like a large mainstream institution. And I feel that, essentially I although I took a lot of issue with that mainstream institutional system and the dominant culture and all that, I definitely gained some training in how to work in the dominant cultural expectations and the norms in professional settings and whatever society in general, like how understanding bureaucracy and understanding how the expectations of how people show up. And, again, I've mentioned white supremacy and all kinds of patriarchy and things. So it's living this kind of contradiction and paradox of actually choosing to get trained, and in order to, practically succeed, if you're all trying to figure out how to get your material basis covered. And then if your goals are to intervene and actually try to transform, then understanding how the game functions and being able to insert yourself in the game. So this is a public institutional setting, not necessarily a private kind of, more technical profession. So what did I take advantage of? I was, I think it'd be kind of helpful. I don't know where people are in this, like in the future, maybe a poll of like who's here and what stage of their academic career they're in. Because my sense is if you're in this thing, you're probably graduating really soon. And so you're finally like, oh shit, I need to figure this out. I got to get a job. I got to, whatever. And that's going to be a different experience than talking to you about what you could have done over the last 3-4 years. So any case, so I'm going to give a little middle path here. It's like, maybe you got a little more time still in academia. And if it's so, that comment about like finding somebody that you want to work with, or their lab or whatever, a place, like CASVAS is a farm. If you want to start understanding agriculture, not like you're going to go become a farmer, but you got to understand like basic literacy and understanding what soil and plants and, basic stuff. Get an entry-level job working somewhere. And, and so I'd say if you're going to graduate, this is the same thing. It's like, insert yourself in some activity, some professional work setting. And, if you're privileged enough to like not have to make a certain amount of money and support your family right now, if you can put yourself in where you're interested most at the entry level, and then use that time to develop relationship and demonstrate that you're serious enough that you're gonna, basically show up on time and do what you say you're gonna do, and be able to follow instructions and apply yourself, and then stick around for like a year. Like stick around for a while so that someone could actually write you a letter of recommendation, because at some point someone's got to vouch for you that is respected and knows the professional field enough to say, yeah, this person has something there that you should look at and take them serious, as in like hire them for the next level thing. And so it's either like within the entity that you're working for and there's an opening and you move up into that, or it's that person who's supervising you's peer who's working at this other organization or entity, and you're a known quantity. So when they write their letter of recommendation or they have the phone call, they're like, yeah, I know somebody who's a known quantity. Like you can trust that this person is going to do X, Y, and Z because we've been running through it together. So if I were to give you anything about when you're in college, it's like, if you're still in college and you got some time here, like put yourself in some kind of working relationship with some faculty, some staff, some facility setting. And it's very difficult, I think, in life for many people to just find their passion and what they're motivated by and what they're interested in, like at the like most boiled down, simplified, like, well, what actually is going to turn you on and you're going to feel interested in actually pursuing. I would encourage you, if there's nothing more than you could do, is to try to develop your introspective self-knowledge, like what it is that you want to do with your life energy and your time. And if you're not super clear on that, okay, well then just experiment and like start somewhere and be like, does this feel good? Try it on. It's like, this is not really turning me on. Then like go do something else, figure out what it is that you really want, because that's really where you're gonna show up and demonstrate to the people around you that you're serious enough that they're gonna want to keep you, and or they're gonna want to turn one of their colleague friends on to you as a valuable resource. as someone to be hired, essentially, right? And who's going to be able to write you a letter or have a phone call with somebody and actually speak substantively about your accomplishments and what you've done. So I'm giving you two different things, which is like, take your time, try to figure out what you're passionate about, even if it's like simplified, because when you're turned on, your peripheral vision's like way out here. You're not just like motivated because your parents told you to do something or society told you to do something or whatever, but you're like paying attention because you want to make this happen, and you're processing a lot of information, which means you're like learning and growing and developing when you're motivated intrinsically, like your insides, right? So that's the first thing I'm saying is like self-knowledge, like figure out what you're actually interested in, because you're gonna be more successful in developing yourself, growing, having a career, whatever. And then the second thing is like insert yourself, even if it's like at the lowest level of whatever opportunity you can find that's hopefully inside of your self-knowledge of what you're interested in, and like just start where that is and show up on time and do what you say you're going to do, and then move your way up in there until that person's going to want to put you into another position that's higher and is going to compensate you better, or turn you on to a colleague who's got a position, or write you a solid letter of recommendation for graduate school, for some other career opportunity. So if you can get that done as an undergraduate, that's outside the curriculum, so to speak, right? Like my friend over here put himself in the Wilmer lab, and you saw how it just went boom, right? Because it's all social networking and people vouching for you, right? After you show up and demonstrate.
Yes, thank you so much. I do want to get to student questions, but just one last question, because a lot of people asked about this in the registration form, or questions related to this. So if you were hiring for an open position in your workplace, what do you think you would look for in an applicant? Maybe just like one or two things, like skills that you would want them to be able to communicate to you, or experiences that they've had, or something like that. Sarah, would you be able to start?
Sure. And it's a little difficult because it really depends on the position. Like sometimes your team needs a super technical person who speaks R and can deal with that side of things, and sometimes you need someone who can do sort of the public speaking end of things or communications. I'd say if you're able to, like in the interview or in your cover letter or materials, really connect the dots to like how your past experience in whatever capacity links to sort of what's outlined in the job announcement, which is really what you have to work with at the beginning of things. And that you've demonstrated sort of some basic interest in the position by doing a little bit of research and sort of using basic words related to the program or something correctly. Like that's a really good start. Yeah, and as Damien mentioned, the more you can learn about an institution by just talking to people, it's really helpful to understand like whether it's a good fit for you or not. If you're in a position to find something that's a really good fit.
Great, thank you. Tang, do you have any feedback for this question?
Yes. So to me, the hardest part is getting past the HR screen. So I'll give you some advice on how to do that. First, then I'll kind of explain what I would expect if you made it to the interview with me. To get past the HR screen, you need to look at the job posting and look at predominantly the skills that they want. And you need to make sure that your resume reflects that. If you do a one-size-fits-all resume, you're not going to get any responses. If you look at that job posting and it asks you it says, we want someone who knows Python, and you have no skill in Python, my suggestion, go to the next job listing. Because if they have that there's a very good chance that that's what they're looking for. But that being said, for whatever reason, every company in the world, in this job economy, they dump everything onto that job listing. So if you can hit about 75 to 80% of what they're looking for, go for it. Some hiring managers have no clue what they're asking for, and they just hear the buzzword and they just put it on the job listing. So that's the magic number, kind of about 75 to 80%. When you write the cover letter, for me, what I do is I research the company and I want to know the company's values. Then I explain how I match their values. And so what that kind of shows is it shows the hiring manager, shows HR, hey, I did my research on this company. I know what you guys are about. And I'm letting you know that I'm a good match for this company because not only did I do my research, I line up with your values. Now, if you don't line up those values, that's where you kind of got to make the decision like, okay, what am I going to do here? Am I going to fib something or am I just going to go on to the next job listing? And that's something that you got to figure out for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I've known people who've done both of those options. All right, you get past the HR screening. They think you're a good candidate, so they pass you up to in-person interview, or probably for the next 6 months, there'll be a Zoom interview. And these kind of interviews, every company does it a little bit differently, but most companies do a team interview now. So you're typically not interviewing with one person, you're interviewing with at least 2, if not 3. For my current position, I interviewed with 8 people. So that's not unusual. When you get to the kind of in-person interview, I'll ask you about the stuff on the job listing. If it says Python, I'll ask you, okay, what can you actually do in Python? And in GIS in particular, the reason why I keep bringing up Python is if you know GIS, you know that there's something called Model Builder. You also know that Model Builder exports Python code. So what a lot of people do is that they'll say, I know Python because I export Model Builder into Python code. That's not what we're looking for. And if you do all that, I promise you they'll be nice and they'll be polite about it. But that's as far as you're getting because they are looking for it. I see that with Python, and we see that with SQL also. So SQL is, if you're using ArcPro, the equivalent would be like the select by attributes query, basically the query builder. So you can build something in query builder, and now you put on your resume, I know SQL. We're going to know really fast in the interview if you actually know SQL or not, because we'll just ask you a couple of questions. We'll ask you, oh, how would you clean geometry in a SQL database? And if you kind of give us a blank look, we're like, oh, this is one of those people that maybe they had a week or maybe they had a lab on it, and now they automatically put down that they know it. So if you put it down, make sure you know it, or at least in your interview at the HR screen that you're very clear, hey, I know Python, but all I know on Python is ArcPy. I don't know anything else. If you're clear about it, they tend to be a lot more forgiving. Or what I've done is, because I've participated in Maxar's been on this huge hiring spree. Unfortunately, if you're still in school, you totally missed it. But we were on this huge hiring spree for the past 2 months, and I've been in like dozens of these interviews. I'll say, if I like you and I feel that you didn't try to mislead me on your resume, I'll say, hey, I think you're a bad fit for this position because we're actually looking for somebody with a little bit more experience. But I think you'll be a great fit for this much more entry-level position where you really only need to know how to navigate inside of ArcMap. Would you be interested? So we'll do that if we like the applicant and we feel the applicant didn't mislead us. And so that to me, that's what I would look for, and that's what I would do.
Thank you. Damien, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely would need to know that the person understands what the job is and what's involved in the job, what the focus of the work is. But in my field, I think, what we're looking for are people that are critical thinkers. that are passionate and driven to create change. And so it's about their sense of motivation and purpose. And there's some like technical stuff around being, you know, having enough writing proficiency and communication. But in the fields that I work in so okay. So you asked me what I would do if I was hiring, and my position is in education, so I work in the university. So it's really about it's like about your intellectual work and about your passions and what you're pursuing. And so we'd be looking for people that are like, yeah, I'm like, this is what I'm interested in, and this is how I'd like to see the possibility of things in the future working. But my field of agroecology, which is not who I hire people into per se, but the field that I represent and the work that I do is a huge field, from production and distribution and processing and finance and technology. And so I don't think I can actually answer from all of the different areas of agroecology or in terms of the kind of employment opportunities in agriculture. But if I were to say agroecology, what we're about as a whole field of, there's like science and research and scientific, which include educational work, formal education. It's very much a practice of farming and production and distribution. And then it's also a social movement, which is political activism and cultural work. And so these are three different, and within the field of agroecology, they're very different kind of subfields of how agroecology functions. But as a kind of subversive field, so in other words, it's at its base, it's calling the game, as in like, what's going on here is completely unjust and unsustainable, and something needs to radically change, and we're here to make those changes happen, which means that we're inventors, like we're inserting ourselves and subverting what is taking place here. So we're very much bringing originality that's guided by values, but it's like problem solving, critical thinking about what kind of institutional structural settings are at play, what are the forces, how do you intervene, how do you get in and make stuff changes. And it could be working for the water board, right? It could very much, or it could be going into private for like technology interventions. There's all kinds of different ways that you could be doing it, or you could just be doing grassroots community development organizing. So it's a bit broad, but I'd say at the core, there's a passion to be like, the status quo, like we're not settling for that. And we got to figure out a solution that doesn't exist. And so one of the things I just say to people is like, support yourself, support your family, find jobs that exist in the economy of today, but always be open to like inventing what needs to be done. And the economy today does not support, the politics of today do not support, the culture of today does not support. Like, be open to inventing your own path, because it needs to be done. And just because the current political economy and culture doesn't support that, doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be done. So it's getting from like A to B, right? Like keeping the vision of the transformation required, but then like, yeah, show up at that job and make sure you read that job description. Like, make sure you could speak to what it is that they're looking for. And back to my earlier comment, like be about it, like, because you already went through the motions, because you're passionate about this thing. So you show up, it's kind of like, be authentic and do your homework. And so then when you show up, it's like, you don't have to invent something or, front like anything. Okay.
Thank you. And then Aaron, do you have anything that you would look for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still young. I'm obviously kind of very new into this career, but kind of just to go off of what other people say, I think like we all kind of have our own passions and things, and you should just use those as strengths. Like if you are bilingual, or if you have a very like super interest in some specific thing, then kind of play with that and bring that up. And I think that there's ways to kind of play up your strengths, but yeah, I'm still in the same boat as I think a lot of people here, and I'm young, still looking for careers, so it's always a struggle. But I think yeah, there's ways to kind of build up what skills you previously have, and yeah, not the best answer. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you. Okay, so it's almost 6 o'clock. So I would like to open the floor to student questions. So if you have a question, please, if you can unmute yourself to ask, just click the raise hand button on Zoom, and then I'll ask you to unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question. If you can't unmute yourself, please type your question into the chat, and I will try to get to each question in the order that they were asked. All right. So first question, Kirsten, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I had a question, and this one's kind of mostly oriented towards Sarah, because I kind of really related when you said that as an undergrad you had so many varying interests that kind of spread you a little thin. And I wondered what advice you had for kind of narrowing that and picking your focus, as well as how to leverage all the very, very different experiences you've had in different areas to your advantage in like a job search.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mentioned I graduated in 2009, and so it was very much like a take what you could get sort of job market if you didn't go to grad school immediately, which maybe I should have gone to grad school immediately. But I think it's just a lot of applying, and it's a little bit of, I mean, in undergrad, I spread myself thin, but I was really focused more on sustainable development and agroecology and political ecology. And that wasn't the type of sort of path that had a bunch of jobs in 2009. And so I started, I mean, I taught SAT classes part-time, and started taking field ecology classes at a local junior college just to sort of shore up my technical skills to meet minimum requirements for some of the entry-level jobs. And so, I mean, like college isn't the end of learning or the end of getting new skills that can help you pivot to new areas. Yeah, and in terms of picking a direction, I mean, the drought was really interesting to me. And in grad school, I had the opportunity to have dinner with a few other students and the chair of the state water board at the time. And like by the end of dinner, I just really wanted to work for her. I was really excited about what she was all about. So, I mean, that's just luck that you sort of find an area that you're really excited about. And it's hard to do that unless you're a little scattered at the beginning, I think, unless you're really lucky.
Thank you for that question. That was great. Next person, Jonathan, I think you had your hand up next.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey David, I actually have a question for you. Getting back to changing the system, I am interested in something that I'm not sure exists. So I was kind of curious on how to go about finding that. And like my interests are very targeted towards building sustainable infrastructure, and like also like maybe permaculture forests in the global south and rural and impoverished communities to help enfranchise the disenfranchised.
You're talking to me, Jonathan?
Yes, or anyone who might be able to help me like find
Right.
that, or at least like look for it?
Right. Well, first of all, so we we were at an agroecology practicum course in Cuba over a year ago. So good to see you. Good to see you again. And I think one of the first things, you're not sharing much about your positionality, Jonathan, about where you're coming from, but it would probably be helpful. I would say for anyone who's like thinking about those questions about that, it's fraught depending on who you are and what your own backgrounds in your community, where you come from, working with communities in particular that you might be perceiving as like needing some kind of support. And I'm not necessarily critiquing you or your question, because I've got some background with you, but just since there's 28 people on this call, just as a response to that, in other words, it's very complicated working in solidarity with people and towards a common cause, and not being in terms of like being in service to people that are other than your own, in particular from when people have inequities and privileges and that sort of thing. So I'll just say there's in terms of if working with Global South communities is of interest, there are many civil society groups, Via Campesina, for instance, MST, a bunch of social movement organizations that are collectivized and organized in terms of setting their vision and their own agenda as to how they see food sovereignty, food justice in their communities. And so negotiating with communities as to what kind of allied work is wanted to be engaged in, that's where I would start if your focus is Global South. And so Jonathan again, I'm kind of answering your question, but I actually know you, so it's like I'm also doing it for the rest of the people. So Jonathan and I were in Cuba, and a year and a half ago did an agroecology practicum, and so we've met numerous individuals and organizations in Cuba that I'm sure would be interested in talking more with you and exploring like solidarity efforts as an example. And then I would say, email me. Let's be in touch after this session, so I can let other people talk, and we can we can get more detail.
Sweet, will do. I also have one quick question for Tang. Just out of curiosity, are you still hiring?
So I mean, I think it might be too late for the intern program. But you can go to Maxar's career page and see if they're still taking interns. Honestly, for new grads, that's the easiest way to get into Maxar, is to get into the intern program. I think last year they hired half the interns.
Also, is that a paid internship?
Excuse me, you kind of.
Oh, sorry. Is that a paid internship?
Yes, it is a paid internship, and for 2021, it's also a remote internship. So you will be able to do your entire internship over Zoom, because the company, so about half of what Maxar does is for the federal government. It makes sense, right? We deal with satellite images. I think if you think about it, you realize, we do so much work for the federal government that we can't have people, get on a plane, fly to Denver, and somehow, pick up COVID-19, at the airport or in their travels. So this summer, I mean, to me, it's like the perfect opportunity. The only thing I don't know is if they're still taking applicants, because it's a little bit late in the cycle right now. But it's worth a shot. I mean, it'll take you 5 minutes to look and see.
I was just something like I heard you talk about, and I was like, that sounds like a really interesting thing. But he didn't like say if they're still hiring or if it's paid. And that's knowing that I've been looking for internships, I was like, people might be interested in this.
Yeah. And so, we were hiring for full-time positions, entry level, mid-level, senior level. And so at Maxar, the way they do it is it's all team interviews. So you'll actually interview with the team that you'll be working with. You interview with your hiring manager, and you interview with the manager who you will not be reporting to, so that the hiring manager kind of gets a third opinion on the applicant. And so I was part of that team interview where, we just ask a whole bunch of questions, whatever we want to ask the applicant. But yeah, I would definitely just take a look and see if it's there. And if not, I would just keep an eye on it. I know it's been announced, so I don't feel bad saying it, but we're about to launch a set of 6 satellites called Legion. And so assuming everything goes well with the Legion launch, there's going to be a big hiring spree. Kind of near the Legion launch is going to hit during the summer. So I would say look again in the summer.
Interesting. And what is your company stock ticker, just out of curiosity?
It's I believe it's MAXR.
Yes.
I can take a look really quick.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, MAXR.
All right. Thank you for your questions, Jonathan. That was great.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you, Tang. I will follow up with you, Damien, for sure.
Great. All right. Next question, Miriam.
Yes, hi. So my next question is, well, first of all, I come from an indigenous family, so it's very secluded area in Mexico. I'm the first one in my family to pursue a higher education, and so I don't have my family don't have any education whatsoever, with school related stuff. So I kind of feel lost in this new section of my life where I'm trying to find internship and things related to my future. And so I was just gonna ask anyone who can answer, is it okay to feel like you're incapable of fulfilling job demands that the people who are hiring kind of, is that normal? Because I feel like sometimes I don't have experience. While I read through the description, I'm I don't think I can do that. But how did you guys tackle that?
I can start. So I'm also a first generation college student. I'm Hmong, so my parents were refugees from the Vietnam War. Even though they came over from Laos, they kind of had a little spillover in Laos, and they call it Secret War. And so my parents came over as refugees. They had nothing. My dad had nothing beyond high school education. Honestly, I think I would put my mom the equivalent of elementary school. But she didn't actually go to school, so it's kind of hard to gauge that. But I think kind of get a feel for where I'm coming from. So, I show up in school. I have no clue how to pick my classes. I honestly feel I picked my classes incorrectly. If I had to go back, I probably would have done my classes a little bit more differently. I probably would have picked up a couple more statistics, a couple more programming classes than I did. For me, what kind of changed it all for me was I met people who were like me, and not yes, and fellow undergraduates, but also people on staff. I worked a lot with Yuli, who heads STEM diversity. I also met a couple of professors who were very, very much gung ho. Older white men, have nothing in common with me in terms of being first gen, or I think one of them, he was the third generation of his family to get a college degree. But I met with them. They're very nice. Chris Wilmer is obviously be one, a little awkward to talk to, but very knowledgeable guy. And I see Damien kind of laughing, so I'm sure he's had a couple of conversations with Chris. But another, I think technically I don't think he's a professor. I think he might be just a researcher. But Ari Friedlander provided a lot. He's out of the Marine Institute. He had a lot of great advice, a lot of direction. And for me, the big thing was, just going to these professors' office hours. And, some professors, they're kind of anal, right? You go in there and you talk to them, and in a minute, you're I just want to leave. But there are other professors who are very open and very much like gung ho, especially helping out a first generation college student who has no clue what they're doing.
Right.
I think I want to say her name is Dr. Zavalita. She used to be EMBS, but she transferred over to EEB. She's amazing. Like I would try to talk to her, go to her office hours. I have no clue what they are, but I'm sure you can look them up.
Would you be able to again type her name in the chat?
Oh yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add it's a lot of practice at faking it. And I feel like as you get older, you have the benefit of meeting more and more people who speak very confidently and you realize don't know what they're talking about, and it helps sort of I don't know, it helps put everything in perspective. And to just keep in mind that the job announcements are, you know, the people writing sort of the unicorn employee that they would love, but often, you know, everyone they're interviewing has 50% of the skills on there or something. And so it really is just keeping that in mind, that there's no real downside to applying to these positions because it really depends who else applies more than anything. And also, like, reach out to the alumni network because people have a soft spot for students and like helping students, and that's a good resource.
Do either of our other panelists have feedback on that question? Erin, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to bounce off of Sarah and just say, I think mentors are great. I personally met a mentor at my university, and she was also a professor, and she was young, and I felt comfortable speaking to her about anything. And I think she kind of built up that confidence in me and was able to tell me that I could do these things, and was there to vouch for me for whatever positions I was applying to after. And it's hard to approach people. I was never the kind of student that would go and spend hours in my professor's office hours or things like that. But I think the people that you can approach and do feel comfortable to, that are older and have kind of an established position and network and can kind of get you in there, are the ones to sort of let yourself open up to. And yeah, that's kind of the.
Yeah, yeah. On those points, you know, there's the Educational Opportunity Program, and they have a number of different specific support programs like Path to Research, linking students up. Students are first time to college, students of color with specific mentors, faculty, graduate students, people that can relate to the experience of how, you know, there's this idea of imposter syndrome, feeling inadequate because you're unfamiliar. I mean, let's just get straight. White supremacy and patriarchy and all these things are they're totally concrete and real and happening. And so a sense of alienation. Now I come from a working class, you know, poor community of color. So I have this kind of I had a feminist Marxist orientation. So I also feel this antagonism from this space, but you could see I'm occurring as a white male and I'm highly educated at this point. But, you know, finding people who have your back essentially and who share the experience of feeling alienated by, you know, there's some of the things called the white gaze, you know, that to be successful in this game, the way that academia is designed right now, it is an establishment of white male hetero identity, of capitalism identity. And so to be successful in this, it is living this contradiction and paradox, right? Because it's maybe not authentic to who we are. And so I'll just say, for agroecology, in the field of agroecology, you and your family are the future of this work. like period. If you were in, you know, like indigenous people who are coming from indigenous communities coming into academia and transforming and revising the entire agenda, like what's the values and what's important and who are we listening to and whose vision and whose knowledge is actually leading the way through this. So I would just hope that anyway, that works for you, that might be an idea, and that there are, through the ethnic research centers on campus, the EOP, that there's a lot of allies that are working to make sure that you know, you can deal with the dilemma of the feeling of being alienated from this experience and not belonging with the mainstream whatever ideas and values and such, and that yeah, we're here to make sure that you are successful and you are supported. Thanks.
Thank you for all your answers, everyone. And thank you, Miriam, for that question. That was great. All right, next person, Noah.
Hello. So I just had a general question. Anyone could answer this one, but it's about the emphasis on technological abilities, especially for employment. So I was wondering, like, if nowadays it's more expected in just like any sort of job to have like technological skills.
If anybody has any feedback for that question, feel free to speak up.
I can start if no one else, just because I just went right through it. So I'm going to speak from a GIS background because that's, you know, the field I'm in. So I know everybody else kind of slightly different fields, so they can speak to their own field and what their field's looking for. But in GIS, it just depends on the job. Like you'll have your entry level technician jobs and all you do is digitize. And if you want to stick around the Bay Area for whatever reason, whether your family's there, 9 out of 10, that is the job that you're going to get. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be digitizing the maps for Apple Maps, Facebook, or Google. And it's a joke in the GIS industry because we call them the black box sites, because they literally stick you in a warehouse and you work 8 hours a day, just digitizing buildings, highways, roads. And, you know, I'm very thankful for those guys, but that is not a job that I would want to do. And that just typically requires like an intro course. And they're even saying now that we don't need you to have any GIS background. We'll teach you how to do it because they need so many people to do it. And a lot of the people with GIS backgrounds were saying, nah, we're good. So if you ignore those kind of jobs, you can definitely get a GIS job with an advanced GIS courses in undergrad. So that I would say you're probably looking at 2 or 3. It'd be very nice if you did like a senior thesis where you did some kind of GIS work in it. With that being said, when we're looking at the applications and the resumes, you know, if everything else looks good, you're going to be in that pile that we're going to consider. But you know who's going to be on top of that pile is the guy who knows R, the guy who knows Python. Well, that person goes all the way to the top. And that's the first person we talk to. And if we decide that culturally they're not a good fit, or maybe they over-exaggerated their skills, yeah, then we'll pass that person. Then we'll go to the next person. So if all you have is the GIS, I'm not saying you're not going to get a job, but you're not going to be the top applicant that we're going to be looking at. And that's something that I wish I knew as an undergrad. So you don't need to be a Google level Python coder, but you should be able to import, know how to import libraries. You should know how to do some basic scripting. So in GIS, I'm looking for, you should be able to do an intersect in Python. You should be able to build buffers. You should be able to do transformations, projections, define projections. These are all very basic GIS tasks. And if you've taken a GIS course, it's a basic ask. Someone who's taken an intro class can do it. But it's a whole different thing to do it in Python, to do it in R. And so that's kind of the reason why those guys would go to the top of the list. Because, whenever I attend these kind of seminars, you always hear the hiring manager say, oh, we don't care about that. We want the person that can communicate well. Well, it turns out the guy who can communicate well can also do all that. So that's what, in terms of technological skills, that's what that does. It doesn't rule you out. It just being honest and being real with everybody here, it doesn't make you the number one or the number two applicant. And so what you're banking on at that point is that the number one or the number two applicant is just a jerk, or somehow for some reason just bombs the in-person interview, and that you get to your third or your fourth, which is probably where you're going to be slotted at if you don't have those skills. Now, if you are, and I didn't realize this until Damien mentioned it earlier, so thank you, Damien. If you're graduating and you're like, I have no time left, or the Python class is not being offered, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? You want to know something? I've never taken any formal coding classes. I learned all my coding from YouTube, Stack Exchange, reading blogs. That's how I learned how to code. And as long as you can find something you're passionate about, and I know this has an environmental background, and I did kind of cut my teeth on doing a lot of environmental analysis, obviously working with the Wilmer's Lab, but where I really got good at it, I'm a huge basketball fan. And so I imported basketball stats, and I just did a bunch of weird statistics and modeling in R and Python, and that's how I actually got good at it. I wish I could say, I was so passionate about the environment that, I downloaded all this data from Natural Earth and I did all these amazing environmental analysis. Nah, it's all MBA stats. And so whether it's the environment for you, whether it's the MBA, whatever it is, Jonathan mentioned like he wants to know the ticker symbol for Maxar. Maybe it's finances. Whatever it is that you need to motivate yourself to learn it, do it. When it comes to the interview, all we care is that you know how to do it. We don't care how you learned it. We are in a job economy where, at least as far as coding is concerned, it's a little bit different with domain knowledge. But as far as coding, we understand that people are learning how to code in different areas. One of the best coders in my company has a history degree. He's not learning any coding in the history program. He learned it all after the program. So if you don't have those skills right now, it's not too late. And it actually doesn't take that much time to learn how to code at a decent level, where for a GIS job, you would be considered the number one applicant. I would say if you were to start, let's say you want to take the rest of the night off, if you started tomorrow, you could be decent in 6 months. And that kind of places you kind of that prime job application period. So hearing me say that, you're not out of the, you're not all of a sudden a wash. You still have time. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that I can't code. I've been good at GIS in the past, but have probably forgotten most of it at this stage. I would say with like younger, sort of like newer state scientists and state engineers and state geologists, which are sort of the types of positions I work with the most, coding and R and Python specifically are more common among the people coming in. And I'd also say like master's degrees are more common with the people coming in, as compared to, the folks who've been there about, 10 years or so. So it is one, there are a number of things that help you, like, at least for environmental scientist type positions, for example, GIS is often on sort of as a desired skill. Understanding of the California Environmental Quality Act is often sort of a desired skill. So there is some benefit to having working knowledge of some of those more common skills that pop up in job duties, but there is life out there if that's not what you're focusing on. Is what I mean to reassure everyone.
Does anybody else have feedback for that question, or should we move on?
I'll just say, don't underestimate your getting a degree from the University of California. It is actually training you to be a decent writer. I mean, you might get out of here not getting writing skills, but it's one of the cornerstones of this kind of education. Pretty good critical thinking skills. So, there is like, you get a bachelor's degree, and it doesn't matter where you get your bachelor's degree and what the common conceptions are about what kind of basic skills that you come in with. And like, analytical reading and various critical thinking and decent writing skills are the school and UCs in general are assumed that you're going to actually have some decent compared to other kind of programs. So and I just want to say, for folks who might be feeling like, like it's gnarly, right? This whole, the economy, it's probably going to bounce. Like I'm my personal perspective is it's going to bounce really hard. There's going to be a lot of actual work that's going to come in the next year because the fundamentals are good. And as long as this vaccine stuff keeps up and it actually works out, there's going to be a lot of employment opportunities. But I get that it's like miserable right now. And so I would encourage people just to think about how you can trust and be confident in your education, that you're actually getting a solid education and that it can't be taken from you. Like, you might be a year or two before recovery happens and you can reposition yourself. But, this is just like a little morale pep talk about, like, you still got this education and it's really important for your career prospects indefinitely, for your life, like as economies come and go, right? I think, Sarah, you said you came out in the last recession, right? Like, things come and go. Sarah, you're probably making some good money at this point with your title, right? You're making over 100,000 maybe or something. I don't know, but you got some like serious benefits,
Great benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, anyway, my point is, like, it might be looking really ugly right now, but I would encourage people to, at least if you can, let it in. Like, you're getting a solid education. You're going to actually be fairly well positioned into the future. It may not be looking good for a year or more, but don't yeah, try to look forward. Yeah, that was it. And in that, you talked about skills, and it's like, yeah, computational skills, use of basic programs and computers, communication platforms, like this all stuff could be taken for granted. I mean, I'll just say, you see, whatever, we're not like, this isn't necessarily a really snobbish Ivy League competitive atmosphere. And so you could always be looking at yourself as like, well, I'm just not that yet. I'm not that. That's like, look at them. But like, you're actually pretty darn well educated from this school. And relative, it's all like Darwinian in this, like, I don't subscribe to this capitalistic game, but it is the way it is with like job prospects and career, right? It's like a competition, and it's like, it's not like you don't have to run so fast. You just need to be like that much faster than the next person who gets eaten by the predator, so I know it's a kind of a really sad and dismal kind of picture, but the point is more like, if you don't feel like you're like so Olympic accomplished amazingness, just know that it's like, yeah, but you got a lot going for you, and you'd be surprised when you're looking across the averages across the entire country and across the state as to people's educational preparedness and basic skills and such. Consider feeling a little bit okay about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that everyone else has said. And if you're going to be miserable, like coding or doing GIS, then don't do it. I don't think it's worth like trying to put yourself into that kind of industry if that's not something that is you. I took GIS when I was in college, and career. And I was able to find this position at a nonprofit where I am much more on the education side of things. And there's other skills on this side of work that are not technically very like tech related. So there's just like, we have a database that we use, and a lot more of like marketing type skills and things like that. So just go with more than anything, rather than feeling like you have to learn something just because everyone else is learning it, or you feel like it would market you better. Yeah. And also what Damien said, that coming from a good school, it means something, and be developed throughout your time in college. So you can use those to your advantage.
Thank you for those great answers. That was a great discussion. Next, Zygmunt, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No, that's cool. That's fine. I was gonna ask what your guys' what's a normal day in your work life? What does that look like?
That's a great question.
Sarah, you want to go first now? I heard some child in the back, maybe. maybe us parents should go last, since we're like
Yeah, someone was trying to
relatable.
break into the room. Yeah.
We're least relatable, so let maybe the other ones.
Erin, would you be able to go first?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the question? It kind of blipped out for me.
Yeah. What's a normal work day look like for you? Like, what do you do when you get to work? Like,
I think I heard what.
okay, I'll just write it in the chat.
Yeah, I think there are some connection issues.
I heard them fine. So I think out of everybody here, I probably have
what
the
I got
most.
from that was what.
Am I good, or is? All right, so I guess I'll
Yeah,
go.
ahead.
Okay, so I think my just kind of knowing everybody else's what field they're coming from, mine's gonna be the most boring work day, and that's just the nature of what I do. If you ask any GIS professional, if they tell you that they love their job, they are lying. I think the most honest response you'll get from a GIS professional is, I don't love it, but I don't hate it. And that's a pretty good place to be, actually, because I don't want to be identified by what I do as a job. The job, to me, is a means to an end. So to answer their question, for my normal day, my position is very fortunate in that even when we go, once the pandemic is over, hopefully it's over soon, I'll still have the opportunity to work from home. It's a fully remote position if I want to keep it a fully remote position. My boss says I only have to come into the office if I want to come into the office, or if we're doing like a team building exercise that day. So my day starts at 8 a.m. I will roll out of bed at 7:45, brush my teeth, walk over to my computer, power everything on, and I will go and I will join my morning Zoom meeting with the camera off. And when the pandemic first started, everybody had their camera on. As of this morning, nobody had their camera on. So I know everybody's doing the exact same thing. So we'll get special updates. We'll find out if, since I'm in the satellite industry, we'll find out if there's anything that needs to be reconfigured on the satellites, if anything special needs to be done. And that's probably about 30 minutes to an hour. And then after that, it's just whatever project I'm working on at the time. My current project is not it's not the sexiest project in the world. I'm doing some database cleanup. And so that basically involves me looking at lines of code for about 8 hours. But I kind of get the liberty of going at my own pace as long as I meet the project deadlines. So, like today, I just felt like going for a walk around the block. So I just got up and walked around the block around 10. Have a lot of flexibility. Like I said, it's not, I'm sure the other three, their jobs are going to sound a lot more fun. or hopefully it does, just judging by the way they're looking. But
I have a kid. Our job, Sarah, I'm going to speak for you for a moment. Those of us with children at home, it's a different story.
Yeah, so I mean that's all I do. Next week I'll probably throw in a couple more Zoom meetings somewhere along the day. I might get a couple of IMs about like, hey, I'm having trouble doing this. Would you mind looking at it? And that's probably the other part of what I do. In terms of GIS knowledge, I'm kind of like a little bit higher than most of the people on my team. Um, I think there's only one person who knows more GIS than I do, and they're like so busy, nobody likes to bother them. Like I'll just get messages and they'll ask me, hey, how do I set the projection again? Or how do I do this? And so I'll say a couple hours a day will be troubleshooting my other teammates' issues. So I don't know how that sounds like to you, but you know, the only time it honestly where it gets to the point where we're like pulling our hair out is at the end of each quarter, because each team is trying to meet their deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're all trying to push our, basically there's a gatekeeper. And we're trying to push everything to the gatekeeper. And so imagine like 100 people trying to exit a room through one door. And that's kind of what it becomes like at the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
But when it's not the end of the quarter, it's a pretty, you know, smooth sailing, you know, write some code. Maybe I'll pull up some, you know, if it's something fun, like right before the Super Bowl, we were able to kind of like, hey, we're trying to configure the satellites so that they pass overhead for the Super Bowl. Take some nice pictures. Sometimes, you know, there'll be academics, like Maxar has a program where academics can request satellite imagery for free. It may not always be the satellite images they want, but we know we provide some stuff. And, you know, sometimes we get to be a part of that and we can like talk to them like, okay, what do you want to do? Oh, so sounds like you want to work with this imagery, and we kind of work with them on their project. But otherwise it's pretty ho-hum for me at least.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Aaron, if your connection issues are a little better, do you want to give some feedback for that?
Yeah, sorry about that. Every day is like a little bit different for me, but as the outreach coordinator, my main job is to kind of just connect with other organizations and make sure that our partnerships are still happening. We have a lot of grants in place, and that's kind of how we receive funding for our nonprofit. So I do connect with other organizations or kind of like federal government, different like levels of government to apply to grants. And so a lot of meetings and things like that. And then a lot of the other kind of work we do is sort of on the social media side of things. We're creating events and then marketing those events. And that's been a little bit different with pandemic, but we're just had to convert our events to be virtual. And yeah, I just finished up recently a fundraiser for Valentine's Day. And so that was kind of what I was working on for the past couple of weeks. So I would say every week for me is a little bit different, but yeah.
Thank you. Damien, would you be able to talk about a day in your life?
Actually, Sarah, I'm curious how it's going over there.
I'm lucky. I have local parents who have been helping for the past few months with childcare, because otherwise it's impossible. Yeah, I mean, I right now I'm sort of transitioning into a temporary supervisory role. So my days right now are substantially different than my days a month ago. I would say it's a lot of meetings. And I mean, it's meetings, it's internal meetings upwards, it's internal meetings down, it's meetings with other agencies, it's meetings with outside groups. It's a lot of meetings. the downside of sort of moving up in the state is you don't get as much field work and you don't get to bite into projects quite as much, but you do get a little closer to sort of understanding where the decisions are made, which is fun in its own right. Yeah, but as more of a staff person previously, it was a more reasonable mixture of like, you know, some meetings to keep your boss apprised with what's going on, and a lot of research, a lot of reading of documents, a lot of writing of documents. But that's because I'm sort of in the more analytical scientist path, rather than the technical scientist path. So it varies a lot even within sort of job classification.
Yeah, and I mean, what I feel like I'm hearing here is like we got trained in scientific, so environmental sciences, environmental studies, ecology, got like the qualitative and quantitative kind of analytical, as well as introduction to producing primary data, even at least maybe in school. But then, you know, once you're in these positions, there is I get, so I'm just going to put on my like academic hat for a moment, like academic career hat for a moment,
Yeah.
which is that there's a lot more out there than tenure track faculty positions and like office staff. Like there's so many different kinds of academic positions within the universities and colleges and campuses across the country, and some of the very same things that we might do in an academic non-tenure track faculty position would be similar to maybe what Sarah's doing right now, and or maybe what Sarah you did when you were on the ground doing some primary project data collection or management or something. So I would encourage people to consider, I guess at the base of it is like, if you're interested in the sciences and you know, you could be working for state agencies, local municipalities, federal agencies, as well as public higher education, which has research institutions like land grant universities, colleges of ag. So there's a host of different kind of job positions that you might fill, but across these different kinds of organizations or institutional settings. And I haven't even mentioned, like, you know, say the private stuff, like you're talking about working with satellites and all the informational science technology work. Like, yeah, that's right there the same. You might not be doing like water sampling in kind of ecological sense, but you're managing data, right? GIS is like capturing imagery and all kinds of crazy kinds of energy wavelength typologies, right? I mean, the different kinds of images you can take with different kinds of instruments that are measuring data on the Earth's surface from a satellite. So it's, you know, or working for a nonprofit, Aaron, you know, like there's maybe you're doing mostly like program implementation, community-based like actually looking at how to increase forest cover in the municipal area, but there's probably arborists that are on board, or there's a need to be able to be literate enough in ecology and environmental sciences to then work with specialists to then develop programs that then engage the public to do like tree planting projects. So I'm trying to like boil it down to the commonalities that we may all have with basic environmental sciences and ecology, and then like you can pursue careers that might end up with job positions in private industry or public organizations. So it's kind of like the world is creating all these kinds of entities with positions, and you're finding your way towards them, and you could end up in any number of these settings. And then once you're in there, the organization might keep, you know, advancing you in that way. So if you were to ask me, you know, like most academics, yeah, I basically control most of my own schedule. And I also have deadlines for for products, or in the case where I'm teaching, that I also have to be there when the classes start, and then I have to produce activities and assignments, and then I have to do assessments and evaluation. And so these things, there's a clock involved in all those kinds of activities. But generally, even pre-pandemic, it's like your head and your hands on a keyboard. You could be anywhere for the most part. So, I mean, and I think that's true for a lot of these. Increasingly, we're discovering through the pandemic that like a lot of work can be done. The further you get in your career development, can be done in, translocation. You can drop in when it's important to be physical in a certain space, but often you could be working the phone and getting a lot of business handled.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
And let's see, Aaron.
Oh, sorry, I have a 6-year-old, and so the same thing, Sarah. I didn't mean to focus only on you. I didn't mention my 6-year-old. Yeah, if you didn't have Netflix, like everybody with kids would just be dead right now. Like the whole world would have just like imploded without Netflix.
I'm surprised it hasn't imploded already.
Yeah. What do
honest.
I do? I'm like feeding, laundry, cleaning. I'm schooling. I was like 5 hours today with our little homeschool pod, and then I'm on this call with you. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so Aaron, I think you had your hand raised next. If anybody else has another question, I am expecting that we'll probably have time for maybe one more question, or maybe two if they're short, after Aaron gets his question answered.
Yeah, this is a pretty short question. So this is a question for Sarah. As someone who also, you mentioned that you graduated into the recession in 2009. I just graduated this past December. I was wondering what your advice would be for like, what's a good use of my time? Just because there's so few jobs out there right now, like what would you consider a productive thing to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, functionally, it's hard. I'm sorry. I took classes at the local JC because I was living at home. The classes were cheap. I was learning things that I could potentially, put on a resume, and it also helped sort of fill that emptiness on the resume. And I'm sure, I don't know of anyone who immediately, like anyone in my cohort who immediately went into what they sort of ended up doing in the long term. A few people went straight to master's programs, and one of them got a PhD, and she hated getting her PhD. So there's a risk everywhere. Just functionally, the more you can keep gaps on your resume filled to show that you're hustling in some capacity, the better. And good luck. And it ends at some point.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. That was very great, very topical, obviously. Yeah, so if anybody else has any questions, please raise your hand. Even if you already asked a question, if you have a follow-up, that's totally fine. And again, if you can't unmute yourself, you can just ask in the chat. That's totally fine as well. All right, Jonathan.
Hello. Yes, so I have already been out of college for a year. Unfortunately, it was the year the world decided to come to an end. I am trying to figure out my next move. I have my dream job that I would really love to do, which is, helping in the global South to help disenfranchised communities, build up sustainable infrastructure, from within the society as a part of the society. My dream would be to live there for a bit, become part of the community, and then help them build it from within the community. But like I said, I have no idea if that exists. In the meantime, I do have a degree in GIS, and I do need to pay off my loan somehow. But I'm wondering, because I've already been looking for a year, is it better for me to just start looking into like master programs at this point, or should I continue with the dream, or should I just try to get a job right now in GIS now that I know that it might, like, is it better to do an internship, like try to find a paid internship and continue down that path? I just don't know what would be like the best path for a person right now, you know. And any insight from people who are in job field?
I would love to answer this question. I actually applied to Peace Corps and was extremely interested in similar work along what you were just explaining. And I think you should potentially consider AmeriCorps, which is what our city forest has a program in. But their AmeriCorps is kind of a domesticated version of Peace Corps, and you can apply and enter into kind of any field, be it public health, be it environmental services, public services, things like that. And they'll place you with an organization in a location that you have a preference of. And then you earn a living stipend, and then on top of that, an education award that you can use to pay off student loans. And so that's an option if you need to kind of cover some loans that you have. But yeah, it seems like the coronavirus is not going away for a while, so gotta hang tight for a bit, but.
So I can tell you with GIS, if you are planning to stick around Santa Cruz, San Francisco Bay Area, for an entry-level position, realistically, you're going to be doing what I talked about earlier, and that's digitizing all the building footprints. It's a horrible, horrible job. It is
That's
a job yeah. What? But there have been a surprising number of UCSC alumni that have done that and are now in decent jobs in the Bay Area. I've known a few people who've done that. I don't know how you feel about Facebook, but they work on the Facebook Maps team now. There's a few people that work on the Google Maps team now, Google Earth Engine, but they had to go through that kind of entry level. It's almost like the gatekeeper to get into the better GIS jobs. And realistically, that's what you're looking at without a graduate degree of some kind. You may have better prospects. The thing I wish that GIS instructors like just flat out told people on the first day of classes, GIS is a field that is super concentrated in only a few areas in this country. If you're looking at entry-level positions, realistically, we're talking Denver, St. Louis, Missouri, and Washington, D.C. That's where you need to move to get a GIS job. The GIS jobs everywhere else, like if you had a classmate that managed to get a job at the county level or the city level, that was more luck than anything else, because it's really hard to get those jobs. The people who do get those jobs, they stay in it for like 40, 50 years. And so, I mean, that's just the reality of what it is with GIS. The first year is just going to be horrible. A lot of people in the GIS industry look at it as paying your dues. So if you want something a little bit more fulfilling, I would definitely do what Aaron said and do the AmeriCorps route. You might be able to build some connections coming out of that. Might be more fulfilling for you, but that's just the reality of GIS.
And internships don't help that any? Or like a paid internship with a company? Because there are a couple of companies around here that are offering paid internships, and then there's like a city nearby offering an internship. I don't know if it's paid, but is that a better option to do than an entry level?
So to me, a lot of these paid internships, it just depends on how the pay is structured. Some internships, like they'll say, yeah, we're giving you $1,000 stipend a month. You know, that's not much to go on in that area. If they are willing to give you a wage that you can live in, I don't know what that number is to you. Realistically, in that area, if it's a full-time paid internship where the expectation is that you have a bachelor's degree, I wouldn't do it for less than $20. And the reason is you can find GIS jobs, that entry level digitizing job for they start you at $20 an hour in that area, or at least they did a couple of years ago when I was there. Um, it's worth it's worth a shot in terms of networking. You might want to ask, what the possibility is of conversion from internship to FTE. That's full-time employment. If that's a possibility, if that happens, a lot of people I've found are very sympathetic, and they'll tell you up front. They said, no, there's no chance for conversion. Or they might say, it just depends. We have converted people. You just kind of want to find out what you're stepping into before you accept it. Hope that helps.
Yeah. I guess, Damien, do you know if like the kind of jobs I'm talking about and organizations you mentioned earlier, are those the kind of jobs that I would be doing volunteer work, I'd be internshiping, or they like actually have positions that I could theoretically get into?
Well, I do want to say, like Aaron said, the AmeriCorps, there's a number of different programs within AmeriCorps that are reasonable. I think anybody, like if you're living in the Bay Area or you're living in California, high cost of living situation, you either need to be making like good money, like you got to start at 50 something, going to 70 soon, like in your prospects, or you got to be in school and doing some kind of educational self-improvement, professional development. Because if you're not making money and you're not improving your prospects of your like education and career, then you're slipping and it's costing you, and they're taking it, the market is going to consume you. So we didn't talk about graduate school, but I would say that, graduate school, especially during recessions, like I can't tell you, I've had like a part-time job writing letters of recommendation and supporting students with their statements and stuff right now, because what happens when you have economic downturns, high unemployment, people go back to school. Why? Because they're going to prepare themselves for the next turnaround in the economy. They're going to be more prepared, right? It's like they're making use of their idle time. If you don't otherwise have good things to be doing with your time, then do self-improvement, like do preparation. So on the tip of like international ag development, there's conventional approaches to this. This is not typically the way it's designed. If it's institutional, like USAID, the Peace Corps is a little more progressive, but people still have a lot of issues with that. Like that I'm trying to say this, it's like it's like if you're going to participate with mainstream institutional organizations, their missions are and their actions are not yet aligned with social justice and environment, like in terms of the real integrity and results. But if you want to work in them and cause something different to happen within your sphere of influence, right, and grow your sphere of influence and try to make interventions and get stuff done, you can consider going and getting a graduate degree in international ag development. That's what I did at UC Davis, for instance. Most people go to the Peace Corps and then they come back out of the Peace Corps and they realize that they need to strengthen their sciences or something, because they went into the Peace Corps with like a history degree or something, and they want to actually work in ag development internationally, and so they would need some more sciences behind that and some project management and those kind of things. So there's just an idea for you that's like AmeriCorps is something to do that's productive with your time, but at this point you might also be considering graduate degrees. Now, by the time now you're applying, because right now is the application period for graduate school, you're talking about applying next fall. And I don't know, my prospects, I think employment's going to turn around here once everybody's vaccinated, because there's a lot of money.
Yeah, there's a lot of economists that are saying that come like late June, middle of July, it's all going to turn around. But I have no idea if that's
be
true.
prepared. My point is that graduate school, for y'all that didn't apply yet to graduate school, it's a whole nother year cycle of getting your applications in and then getting accepted, and the program starts, so you got to make your own decisions about how you strategize. But no matter what you're doing, I'd say either, do something, put yourself in action in some way, or I don't know, if you have the privilege to just take to do self-enrichment and other activities in your life, like go travel. Well, I guess you can't travel, right? That doesn't work. So like, I don't know, figure it out. Some other way to use your time.
Right.
And this probably doesn't speak to your areas of interest, Jonathan, but the budget picture, the state budget picture is looking pretty good for next year. And that relates to whether the state is hiring usually. So it doesn't hurt to get yourself on some of the sort of civil service classification lists.
And the money also for municipal, right? I mean, at least this thing gets past the 2.9 trillion or whatever.
Yeah.
A bunch of that's going into city and municipal budgets. So, yeah.
Yeah, if it helps, Maxar stock went from $10 at this point last year. It's about 50 to 55. We expect to keep climbing. We're going to have money to hire. It's just going to be around that time frame, end of the summer.
That's when everyone's hiring, apparently. It's a good thing I taught myself how to code this past year. Yeah. And for people who are interested in also doing that, I highly recommend the Odin Project. It's a great resource. It's like a whole thing about free coding, and the Reddit pages for learning how to code are priceless. They're phenomenal. They will turn you on to so many other. There are like a million free things. I mean, free code camp is a standard, but from what I hear, it's out of date. What I remember, it kind of is.
Thank you for that question. Thank you for all your questions, Jonathan. We have 2 minutes left before our official time block is over, and I don't want to take up our panelists' time. But Aaron, do you have just a quick question?
Yeah, it's really quick.
All right. So what's your question? And we'll end on that one.
Great. So this is for the other Aaron. You mentioned that you work in the nonprofit field. I was just wondering how that is, because I've done some work in nonprofits before, but just how is it as a career path?
If that, sorry.
Yeah, I personally.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's a great question. If you could just keep it sort of brief, and also if any panelists would be willing to share their contact information, obviously with your consent, and you definitely don't have to, but if you would be willing to do that, that would also be a great way to answer some of these questions more in depth. But yeah. But please answer the question. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy to put some contact info.
Yeah, I am too. And I'm going to have to jump off for bath time in a minute. Oh.
Go ahead. I'm going to mute myself.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. If you'd like to answer the question now, that's totally fine. Just our official block of time has ended, and I don't want to take too much of everybody's time.
If I could, I need to say goodbye. So forgive me, Aaron, for stopping there, but I need to feed my kid and such. So yeah, blessings, everybody. And thanks to the co-panelists. Great work. Encourage everybody. Congratulations, co-panelists, and good luck, everyone.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you to all our panelists. This was a really great discussion. I loved hearing all your answers. And I loved hearing everybody's questions too. There were some amazing questions. So thank you so much to everybody.
Thanks for moderating. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. What?
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to ask if the two Aarons would like to stay on the call to answer that last question. It's totally all right if you have to jump off, though.
Yeah, sure.
I can stay on for a minute. Yes, so nonprofit work. I mean, it's definitely, so if that's something that you're looking for, then I would say maybe revert to something else. It's not working. But I think the payoff of what the work you get to do is really amazing. Friends and things from college and
I'm sorry, Erin. I think you're
whatnot kind of
connected.
entered innings and
Sorry, I think your connection is cutting
I'm
out.
gonna try to turn off my camera and see if that works.
Oh, yes, that sounds so much better, actually.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Sorry about
I'm
that.
so sorry that the connection has been so poor. Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, basically the payoff of working at a nonprofit, I think the work that I get to do every day, and I wake up excited to go to work, and I know that I have kind of like a good group of people that are surrounding me, and I'm working for an organization whose mission I genuinely believe in. And that is kind of what motivates me to continue a career in this field. But if I cut here, it's definitely so. If that's something that you are interested in, I would suggest perhaps reverting to some other field, or yeah, because this is why my internet is not the best, to be honest.
I'm really sorry. I think you cut out for that last part. That's all right. I apologize for any connection issues.
I'm just
It's
gonna
all right.
say,
I think I heard most of it. Yeah. Thank you. That was very helpful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Erin. And thank you, Erin Cole, for your question. Right, that marks the end of our event. It's 7:04. Again, thank you all for coming. Thank you everyone for your great questions. And again, this recording will be uploaded to the Career Success YouTube channel and also emailed out to everyone who registered for the event. So have a very good night, everyone. And
thank you.
good luck. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Have a good night.
You too.
thank you.